2019 was a year with sheer cases of violence towards women that shocked the South African nation. From the brutal murder of Uyinene in a post office to the mutilation of Lynette Volschenk in her own apartment. Each case highlighted the disturbing prevalence of GBV in our country. In the midst of all of these, one particular case was not mentioned as much as others. One fell along the wayside, so to speak. In the bustling community of Mitchell's Plain, a disturbing murder occurred, leaving a community horrified and a family in despair. A young girl had her life stolen by individuals she knew and had grown up with. And as the court case dragged on, the quest for justice turned into a long and arduous battle. This is the story of a community's loss, a family's heartache, and an enduring fight to bring the killers of a young girl to book. This is Janika Mello's story. Hello and welcome to Murder Mayhem, a Bella Monsoon exclusive production. I know, before you say anything, it's been a minute, a month, it feels like a decade since my last video, and you're probably wondering if I fell off the face of the earth. Spoiler alert, I obviously didn't. So between juggling things in my personal life as well as posting daily true crime content on my other social media channels, I took a small hiatus. Also, if you don't follow me on my other social media profiles, please go and do it. I promise you'll find a ton more content in between videos. So think of this break as a mid-season break, except without the cliffhangers. Unless, of course, you want to count my laundry pile reaching a height worthy of its own investigation. Please, everyone knows washing takes a few hours to do and then 5 to 7 working days to pack away. But fear not, I am back, and I know some of you might be rolling your eyes and you may not have faith in that statement, but I will be working to earn back your trust. On the real though, no jokes, thank you all for your patience and for sticking around. Your support literally means the world to me. So that was a pretty long intro, but it has been a pretty long time. But for those of you who are new, stick around for a few more seconds and let me tell you who I am and what I do. For those of you who are returning, I know, you want to get straight into it, so skip ahead, the timestamp is on screen. So for those of you who are still here, I'm assuming it's because you're new or you just missed my intro, so welcome. I am a registered mental health professional who just so happens to be obsessed with the makeup, true crime, and uncovering the motives that drive people to do what they do. My intimate knowledge and experience within the field thus led me to create the first trauma-informed South African true crime series. That means that every single episode I post looks at a real life crime from a psychological viewpoint. During these episodes, I also try to share psychological knowledge and concepts that you may or may not be aware of in an easy to understand format. So if all of that sounds like something that is right up your alley and you're ready to join me on the Bella journey, then please feel free to subscribe to the channel and hit that notifications bell. But if you're more a fan of podcasts, no worries, I got you covered. You can find me on all major streaming channels, yeah, like all of them, for my sister podcast, Murder Mayhem, South African True Crime. So just a quick disclaimer for today's episode, today's narrative contains material citing murder and assault. As always, I mean absolutely no disrespect to the victim mentioned nor their family. The purpose of this video is to shed further light on the heinous crime that was committed while spreading awareness about the psychological nature of the narrative. As always, this episode has been thoroughly researched by myself and includes, where available, real-life accounts, footage, and images from and of individuals who were involved directly in the case. So without further delay, let's get into it. On the 20th of February 2005, Janika Mello was born to father Marlon Koopman, a pastor, and mother Uyinene. She grew up in Mitchell's Plain, a sprawling township located on the Cape Flats of Cape Town. So for those who are unaware or not from South Africa, Mitchell's Plain was established in the 1970s during the apartheid era. It was initially designed to house people that were classified as non-white under the apartheid regime's racial segregation policies. Fast forward to many years later, where the area struggles with pervasive poverty and high unemployment rates. The lack of economic opportunities has fostered an environment where gang violence is rampant, with numerous gangs vying for control over territories and illicit markets. This violence not only endangers the lives of residents, but also perpetuates the cycle of fear and instability. Families are torn apart by addiction, and young people, in the absence of positive role models and opportunities, are drawn into the world of crime and drugs. Despite these challenges, though, the community of Mitchell's Plain is also characterized by resilience and a strong sense of solidarity, with numerous grassroots organizations and individuals working tirelessly to create a better future for their children. Families just like Janika's. She grew up a bright and bubbly child who wanted to be a doctor one day so that she could help people. She was the epitome of friendliness, and along with her younger sister, she would accompany her father to the homes of the elderly and sick to help cheer them up. She had dreams, ambitions, and a whole life ahead of her. In the year that it would all be stolen from her, she was only 14 years old and a grade 6 student at Northwood Primary School in Mitchell's Plain. And every moment of joy and happiness in her short, young life would bring us to this moment, the day when everything would change. It was the 31st of August, 2019, a Saturday night, and Janika and her mother had become embroiled in an argument. Janine, her mother, had not wanted Janika to go to an event with her friends that evening. Janika, a teenager, despite her mother's insistence, was steadfast on going. Their interaction that evening ended with something that would forever haunt Janine in the years to come. In a heightened emotional state, Janine had slapped Janika, and that would be their last physical interaction. Janika would end up going out with her friends that evening to attend a local soccer team's fundraising karaoke event. The event, which on the surface seemed innocent enough, was taking place in the neighboring area of Portland at the Portland High School. After the event was over, Janika then taken public transport in the form of a minibus taxi back to her area with her friends. On the way home, she had sent her mother a text message to let her know that she was en route. She was then dropped off just a few meters away from her home, but she would never reach her destination, never make it home to her own bed. On that short walk back to her home, she was attacked, grabbed, and dragged into her very own backyard. It was here that she would be brutalized multiple times and have a concrete slab smashed against her head. And then she was left to take her last breaths with used condoms littered around her body, her face unrecognizable. I wasn't able to find any literature detailing the events of the rest of that evening to the next morning in order to understand whether her parents realized she was missing or whether they assumed that she had ended up at a friend's home or she had made it back home safely. There is unfortunately no mention of this in any of the articles I've read. What is known, however, is that the next morning a disturbing discovery was made. That morning, Janika's neighbor, a 19-year-old man, had woken up to his alarm at 8 a.m. He had opened up his window to let in the fresh morning air when he had spotted a young girl's body in his neighbor's backyard. The girl was not dressed from her chest down and her pants had been pulled below her knees. Her open legs, showcasing her private parts, were directly facing his window. At that time, due to the damage that had been inflicted upon her, he didn't know that it was Janika. He had then run to wake up his aunt and uncle, and together they went to the neighbor's home. The shocked neighbors, Janika's family, did not even recognize the young body that lay before them. The left side of her face was smashed beyond recognition. Her mother had only realized that it was Janika when she saw the tackies and the dungarees of this young victim. She would recall her heart leaving her. I can only but imagine how she must have felt in that moment. The police were then called to the scene. And later that day, witnesses from the previous evening would point the two suspects out to the police. An 18-year-old was arrested initially before he had led them to his 16-year-old accomplice. What's worse, though, is that 18-year-old young man was Janika's family, her mother's cousin's stepchild, to be precise, and he had grown up as her cousin. The younger of the two, a boy that Janika had also grown up with, had scratches on his neck, indicating that she had tried to fight back, fight for her life. There would then be a charge of assault laid against the 18-year-old and 2 charges of as well as murder against the minor. At the initial court appearance, a 22-year-old woman would make the claim that the 16-year-old and his friends had gang raped her the previous year on the 1st of September. That very same 16-year-old who was assaulting her had attempted to anally rape her, but she had managed to escape after the girlfriend of one of the guys had come to stop them. This young woman had laid charges against them, but her case was provisionally withdrawn without any explanation. Pretty weird if you ask me. She stated that she could not eat or sleep and feared for her life as the gang continued to threaten her existence. Their bail application was then remanded to the 18th of September. That Saturday at the Colorado Park New Apostolic Church, Janika's funeral would take place. Hundreds had gathered outside her home from as early as 6:30 a.m. to pay their respects to her, with family members wearing t-shirts with her face on it. The school that Janika had attended would also later hold a moving memorial service for the young girl, where teachers, pupils, and parents gathered to remember her beautiful spirit. Her memorial was held on the very same day that both Uyinene and Jesse Hess were commemorated, a day of sadness for so many across Cape Town. The 2 suspects would later appear bruised and sickly at their second court appearance, with more than 100 Hines Park residents protesting outside the court, calling for bail to be opposed. The mother of the 16-year-old was heartbroken to not only learn of what her son was accused of, but also to see the state that he was in. She had said that her son and Janika had grown up together, played together, and he often slept over at her home. She also stated that she had a daughter, and she would never want this to happen to anyone. She also said, though, and I quote, "If my child is guilty, he must rot in jail." The 18-year-old, later publicly named as Alistair Abrahams, would state that he was not applying for bail, probably because he knew what would happen to him outside of jail if he did. Thus, it was only the application for the 16-year-old that proceeded. As the charges were related to a minor and as per the Child Justice Act, the court session was closed. Forlorn-looking family members of the minor were present, sad but willing to accept whatever consequences lay ahead. Not one family member for the 18-year-old Alistair attended the court session, though. Allegedly, Alistair's mother Susan was not allowed to be present due to her son being an adult. Susan had said in tears, and I quote, "I knew Janika, and I know Alistair. My child did not hurt her. The police came to take him, and I haven't spoken to him. I don't believe that he was part of it." In regards to the court appearances, Janika's aunt, Alicia Martin, had said, and I quote, "We are not okay as a family. We want these boys and the ones not found yet to pay for their crimes, and we want no bail. They do not deserve a chance." Janika's family said that they would keep fighting until every single person involved in her murder was behind bars. And honestly, one could and would expect nothing different. Both of the suspects would end up remaining in custody after bail was denied for the minor. According to Pauline, Janika's grandmother, the detective on the case relayed that the suspects were not talking. Additionally, blood was found on the clothing of the minor, but no semen was present in the condoms found on the scene. The case was then postponed pending forensic tests. Around 7 months later, in March of 2020, the 2 accused appeared once again in the Western Cape High Court. At this appearance, both had not yet pled to the charges of and murder. Multiple delays would ensue in the months to follow as national lockdowns came into play and many activities were limited. This was, of course, 2020 after all. The following year, in August of 2021, the community were in uproar after Alistair was released after the charges against him were to be withdrawn. The official word on the streets was that he was not implicated in the murder charge, and so the state saw no reason to keep him in custody and thus released him without any warning. He had then planned to enter a plea and sentencing agreement. Prior to his release, he had been in custody since 2019. According to the indictment, he, along with the minor, who was later named as Leroy Rose, were the last two people to be seen with Janika. According to witnesses, it was also Alistair who was apparently seen assaulting Janika too. His release had occurred just days before Janika's murder trial was finally set to commence. And unfortunately, but not uncommonly, her family were not made aware of this information by the judicial system, and would thus find this disturbing revelation out the hard way when they saw him walk down the street right past their home. Smiling and walking happily, he had given Janika's Oma, her grandmother Pauline, a massive fright. She would later say, and I quote, "We are very angry because nobody told us he was coming out or why he was released. It has been hard on us as a family, and we believe the justice system has failed us." Rest assured though, along with you and I not having it, neither were the community members. Several members of the area marched to his home, calling for him to leave Hines Park, stating that had no place in their neighborhood. At his home, however, his Oma had said that he was not home. The angry community had shouted, and I quote, "Kom uit, is verkeerd van julle groot mense wat julle kinders so bystaan." Essentially translated, it means come out. It's wrong of you big people, you adults, to protect your children. Things changed extremely quickly though, as it was just a month and a bit later that both of the accused returned to the Western Cape High Court, where it was heard that the plea deal had fallen through, and they would both be headed to a full trial the following year, the 25th of July, 2022, to be precise. And after 3 years and much anticipation from friends and family, the murder trial of Janika Mello commenced. Janika's family had said, and I quote, "We are still very sad. We cry every day and we miss our child. We just want the whole thing to be over so we can start living. Not that we will live like we did, because it was not only Janika that lost her life, but the whole Mello family. We just want justice for our child." But justice would once again be halted dead in its tracks, as the unavailability of judges saw the trial grind to a halt in November of 2022. Proceedings were then delayed again and due to start on the 23rd of January 2023. And you probably guessed it at this point. Once again, in January of 2023, it was heard that the trial was delayed yet again. This time, however, due to one of the accused opting for a new lawyer. The matter was then postponed to August 21st in order to give the new lawyer time to consult with his client. And yet again, in the same trend of inefficiency, in September, several months later, it was heard in court by Judge Mark Scher that a court date could not be found due to a clogged court roll. No, seriously, I kid you not. And once again, you guessed it, the matter was postponed. And this isn't even uncommon. This is actually the norm in many cases in South Africa. Cases that are open and closed within a matter of weeks or months are extremely rare. And trust me, with my experience within this field, I know what I'm talking about. Come October, the pair returned to court yet again. This time, they were told that the trial would officially begin on February 2nd, 2024. Marlon Koopman, Janika's father, would tell the media how the delays had left the family in limbo. As you can imagine, closure was impossible. He had said, and I quote, "Every time we try to heal and move on, there is another delay and these wounds are reopened. I will never forget the day my daughter died. I was standing in church that Sunday and just got off the pulpit after giving a sermon when I got the call. The 1 minute I was on the pulpit and the next I was standing over my child's dead body." And finally, in February of 2024, the long-awaited trial began. It would be heard in court how Janika was klapt, an Afrikaans word meaning slapped, twice on the night she was murdered because she refused to have sex with the man she knew. The man who had hit her was none other than Alistair. Janika's best friend, Chandra Kemp, who was now 18 years old, would take to the stand and explain how she knew both the accused and had seen them the night of the karaoke evening. As she detailed the events of the night, she mentioned how after leaving home, Janika and a group of friends had gone to the Watergate Mall. There they had purchased alcohol before heading to Portland's high school. And it was while she was smoking weed at the event that she had seen Alistair hit Janika. The group had then later walked to the shop, and whilst smoking cigarettes, she once again saw Alistair hit Janika. This time, however, a group of boys were not having it, and they retaliated, with another witness, Randall October, stabbing him and chasing him away. The last time Chandra saw her friend alive was in the early hours of the next morning, after she had walked her home. On the way, Janika had confided in her friend that Alistair had hit her because she wouldn't sleep with him. Alistair and another witness would state that the only time that Janika was hit was at the shop. As the trial continued, horrific details surrounding the injuries that she had sustained that ultimately led to her death were heard in high court. On what would have been her 19th birthday, her family sat in tears, listening to the violent acts that were committed against their loved one. The post-mortem report was not read in court, but was also not contested by either of the accused. But it did, however, list over 20 injuries, which included blows to Janika's head, neck, arms, and genital areas. Multiple used condoms were found on the scene, which corresponded to the report of multiple vaginal and anal injuries on her body. Blunt force injuries to the head and neck were ultimately named as the cause of death. And all of this was heard on the day that was meant to celebrate Janika's life. In subsequent court sessions, Leroy would then turn on Alistair, stating that it was him who attacked Janika with, and I quote, a big stone. The revelation came amidst a special application by Alistair to be acquitted of the rape and murder charges, as according to his lawyer, the state had not provided any evidence linking him to the charges. Leroy's testimony, however, did not only place Alistair at the scene of the crime and murder, but also stated how Alistair told him he was going to have sex with Janika. Leroy had then claimed that he went to look for the two later, and he found Alistair holding a big stone and dropping it on Janika's head. Leroy then went on to claim that he tried to stop him, but it was too late, and this was how the splatters of Janika's blood had ended up on his jeans. Alistair's special application was rejected by Judge Pam Andrews, though, as she stated, there was a prima facie case against him. Also, Leroy was not yet done sharing his version of events, as he took to the stand in his own defense. And subsequently, as one can imagine, his narrative began to unravel at the seams. He maintained his denial in Janika's and murder and his insistence that Alistair was the one to blame. He reiterated to the court that he was a huiskind at Janika's home and had considered her a sister. For my non-Afrikaans speakers, a huiskind basically translates to house child. However, it was during his cross-examination that he confessed that he had asked her several times for sex, but she had always maintained that she was not ready and had told him to wait. Look, it's not exactly normal to expect sex from someone who you consider to be a sister. But anyways, he had then apparently once again asked her, for sex that is, at the karaoke evening, and she had all of a sudden agreed. And then the two had allegedly had consensual sex. Twice that evening. Graphic details were highlighted to the court, specifically in regards to the manner in which Leroy had claimed to have engaged with Janika. Medical evidence had shown that despite injuries to both her vagina and anus, the pathologist found her hymen to be intact. This led the prosecution to state that the injuries were caused by someone who had attempted penetration, but was not successful. These facts strongly oppose the narrative that Leroy had shared. He, however, continued to stick with his version of events, though, even going as far as saying that he wasn't close to Alistair at all. They had just played soccer together. He also reiterated how Janika was like a sister to him, but yet he would then go on to state that after he had slept with her twice, he knew that Alistair had taken her to her grandmother's yard to sleep with her. Knowing this, he had not even attempted to stop him and had apparently only checked on them when Alistair had allegedly thrown a stone on Janika's head. As I earlier said, he had claimed that the blood splattered on him as he tried to stop Alistair, but because he was drunk and scared, he had run home and gone to sleep. Alistair, on the other hand, would claim that he was home at the time of the murder, and even brought his grandmother on the stand, Suzette Prince, who told the court that he had arrived home at 2:30 a.m., which coincidentally was the reported estimated time of Janika's death. Interesting. Towards the end of March 2024, after months of hearings and endless delays, the murder trial of Janika Mello was finally concluded. The matter was then postponed for final arguments on April 16th, and then, of course, the judgment. During the arguments that followed, the state would also present that the medical evidence showcased that Janika had been killed by at least 2 individuals. The judge then postponed the case to the 24th of May for judgment. I am mentioning every single postponement because I want you, the observer, to fully and truly understand how many of these court cases play out in South Africa. The road to justice is often a difficult and extremely long one. On May 16th, in the Western Cape High Court, Alistair Abrahams and Leroy Rose were both found guilty on 2 counts of and 1 of murder. Alistair had also been charged with 2 counts of assault, but during the trial he pled guilty to the 1 assault charge and was acquitted on the 2nd charge. Janika's family were happy. Well, as happy as one could be with the outcome and the verdict. The family of the perpetrators, on the other hand, not so much. Leroy's mother came to Janika's family to apologize for what her son had done and strongly believed that he must go and serve his time in jail. Alistair's family, on the other hand, were extremely hostile, acting as though Janika's family were the issue. Go figure, right? Janika's grandmother had said, and I quote, "At the end of the day, we are the ones who lost a child. They can have visitation, but we must visit a grave, and we will never hear Janika's voice again." And although it seemed as though everything was almost coming to a close, once again there was another twist in the case. No, seriously, we're not done yet. After almost 5 years and countless court appearances, the police were called in to investigate the shocking claim that Leroy had falsely implicated Alistair in the murder. In the police van on the way back to Pollsmoor after the judgment, the two had become embroiled in an argument after Leroy was bragging that he had told lies when he implicated Alistair. Everyone who was in the van at the time was interviewed. However, there was a strong belief that it was a setup to stall the sentencing. Janika's family were exhausted and tired of every single delaying tactic and postponement, as you can only imagine. State advocate Markey argued that Leroy should only be given limited mercy, as he was 16 years old at the time, but Alistair should receive a life sentence. He would later state, and I quote, "The accused assaulted and killed the deceased in a cold-blooded manner. They showed no remorse throughout the trial, and they could have saved the mother and grandmother from the secondary trauma of testifying about how they found the body." On the other hand, Alistair's lawyer stuck to the version of events which saw him falsely implicated by Leroy, and called on the court to be lenient, indicating that he might very well bring an appeal to the conviction at a later stage. And so we finally reached a verdict. On the 21st of June, Leroy Rose and Alistair Abrahams were sentenced to a cumulative 80 years behind bars for the and murder of Janika Mello. Both men appeared calm as Judge Pearl Andrews explained the provisions of the Child Justice Act and that there was cause to deviate from the minimum prescribed sentences. In a final twist to this case, yes, I kid you not, she would further state that it was her belief that Leroy had withheld the identity of another person who could have Janika, alluding to the sheer number of condoms found at the scene. She further stated that it was her belief that the duo worked alongside one another to subdue and kill Janika. She added that the manner in which this young girl's life ended was particularly gruesome, with the extent of the injuries rendering her unrecognizable. In addition, there was a complete disrespect shown to Janika as she was sexually violated and left undressed. She did, however, state though that she believed that both of the accused could be rehabilitated. Leroy Rose received 20 years in jail for murder and an additional 20 years for both counts. Alistair was given the same sentence with an additional 8 months on a charge of assault. The sentences will run concurrently, with the duo serving an effective 20 years in prison. Their names will also be entered and registered into the National offenders registry, and they will be declared unfit to work with children in the future. Janika's family would state that given the ages of the perpetrators at the time of the crime, they believed that the court had handed down the harshest sentence they could, and that they were fine with the outcome. I could imagine that it was also sheer relief for them to be able to close that chapter. Janika Mello's tragic story is not just an account of a young girl's life stolen by senseless violence, it's a stark reminder of the pervasive issue of gender-based violence that continues to plague South Africa. Her story highlights the systemic failures and societal conditions that allow such atrocities to occur, from inadequate legal protections to deep-seated cultural norms that perpetuate violence against women. As we reflect on Janika's life and the justice sought for her, we must confront the broader implications of her death. The delays and inefficiencies in her trial expose a judicial system struggling to deliver timely justice, compounding the pain of grieving family and the community. This case underscores the urgent need for reforms that ensure swift and fair trials, support for victims' families, and accountability for perpetrators. Moreover, Janika's story calls on us to examine the root causes of GBV. In communities like Mitchell's Plain, where poverty, unemployment, and gang violence create an environment of fear and instability, the vulnerability of women and girls is magnified. Addressing these underlying issues is crucial to preventing further tragedies. Janika's family has shown incredible resilience and determination in their fight for justice. Their unwavering pursuit serves as an inspiration and a call to action for us all. We must support and amplify the efforts of grassroots organizations working to combat GBV, advocate for stronger protection and resources for survivors, and foster a culture of respect and equality. As we remember Janika Mello, let us commit to creating a society where such horrors are no longer possible. Her legacy should be one of change, where the collective outrage over her death transforms into concrete actions that protect and uplift the most vulnerable amongst us. In honoring her memory, we can strive to build a future where every girl can live free from fear and violence, and where justice is not just a distant ideal, but a lived reality for all. Fly high, Janika, and rest in peace, sweet soul. Until the next one, stay safe, stay blessed, and stay the amazing human beings that I know each and every single one of you are. Bye!